Sounds like another good weekend on Mont Lake.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers, but just a quick reminder, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that like button, click that subscribe as well, and that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video, because we're dropping all the bonus content we possibly can over the, let's just call it the whirlwind that is recruiting, because we've got so much of that to get to on today's show. Looks like four-star offensive lineman Sam Utu, who previously had crystal balls to Washington, might wind up at Alabama. We're going to talk a lot about five-star edge rusher Tristan Givens, who has been the biggest story of the weekend. But first, Lars, we always got to lead off with potential commits. As we're recording this a little after 4 o'clock on Sunday, June 8th, Washington has not gotten any commits, but Jedd Fisch is hinting at 2.
So the always great game of playing, we give the kid their moment, but at the same time, we are going to start doing the dartboard here because I'm a big dartboard guy. And you look at down the list, there's a few names that come to mind that you could say couple would be highlighters, and then a couple would be, okay, solid additions to the class, but nothing that were, and there's no offense to those kids, would be like, oh my God, it's a game changer, massive thing. But it's like all of them still matter at the end of the day. But there's a lot of good options. I mean, you think, there's a couple of ones that are interesting because, you have the Mason James of the world, the guys that still have other official visits scheduled, and then some of the class builder end, the Kai Wesleys of the world, the Faciales of the world, Isaiah Tokyo of the world, were good, solid, strong additions, but not a Tristian Givens, not a Mason James, where you're talking about vying for, Texas and Missouri and a few other schools there. Those are the ones where, again, I don't think the latter two names are in. One of the two might be in consideration, but you can also think like Sam Vyhlidal, like that. That also could be where I'm going as well. Where maybe you got both. Maybe your tight end class is committed, and Jedd saying, "Hey, here we go, you call it even."
So Sam Vyhlidal was the name I wanted to bring up because I'm really intrigued in what he is as a prospect, where it's something where people are going to look at the recruiting ranking and say, oh, he's doesn't have a composite score, number 5 player in Oregon. But I'm really intrigued in just what his long-term potential is as an athlete. You go and you watch that film, he lines up everywhere from split out wide receiver to wildcat quarterback in his offense. So it's one of those things where, at the high school level, it's, we're going to just take our best athlete and make sure we find every possible way to get the ball into his hands. But I like his movement ability. I like the frame. And it's one of those things where you look at it 2-3 years down the line. If this is somebody you and I are talking about as just another Jordan Pow product, as somebody who is all of a sudden a really impressive, even if he's just a second tight end option, that's something I'm really intrigued by. But I think the one name that I really want to bring up where, as the everydayers know, maybe there have already been another bonus show released if somebody chooses to announce between when we record and, when this episode airs, is 4-star defensive tackle Umu-Cais, where you talk about like the game-changing sort of guys. This is something you and I have been talking about on the show for a very long time, because you look at his other official visits, Stanford, UCLA, and Colorado State. And you and I have talked about just like the interest he's had in Washington for a very, very long time, and why Washington has pushed really hard for him to this point. And it feels like one of those things where if they really made a big push this weekend, I could see him committing. I don't want to say he was one of the two where, we dropped some hints to our insiders about who that could end up being just from reading different tea leaves. But between now, again, June 8th, and when his official visit to Colorado State is set to begin on June 20th, just making that commitment official.
Jay Norvell, a good dude, no problem there. I have no issue with Jay Norvell, but I'm just looking at those two schools and thinking, not a choice. Not even a discussion. And that's me. Now, you have hometown things, home state things, all those things factor into it. But yeah, it's a case where, you're looking at it and saying, I don't think he makes it to that weekend, that final visit weekend to CSU, but, I guess more power to him. You still just want to get the whole process to go. But
sure,
he was a guy where I just felt more and more. I mean, I think I posted a video on Twitter, with him and Isaiah Tokyo, basically just like, I just saw that photo. I was like, oh, he might already be committed. Like it just kind of gave off that vibe. Not in a bad way, not reading into it too much, but just knowing how much he likes the staff, knowing how much he likes the school already to fit all that. It's like, you know what? If he happened to be one of them, wouldn't necessarily be as surprised as most people would be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of those things where, again, we've talked about it on the show for a while, where throughout this process, it seems like once that offer went out, like very quickly, because you talked about it, you talked to him, and at first it was, oh yeah, I don't know a lot about Washington. I love Vita Vea. That was the big thing, and just made me very happy personally. But as you said, a couple days later, he came back and said, oh yeah, I'm taking a visit. I really like what the school has to offer. And I just think about how that could play into this class as well, with just the need for as many big physical bodies along the interior of the defensive line as possible, what he brings to the table in terms of his power, in terms of his feet, his first step, his explosiveness, his hand usage, and understanding of how to rush the passer from the interior for being just finishing up his junior year in high school. Like it's all very, very impressive, and something that I think is very important to this coaching staff. But I want to circle back to another name that you mentioned a minute ago, because I think it's worth talking about wrapping up the tight ends class. If Kai Wesley was one of those commits, he's somebody who Jordan Paopao has made a big push now for a very long time with. And I love that frame, and I love that long-term projectability. And you could say that about so many guys from this weekend. Again, Fasiale, Isaiah Tokyo, whoever else it might be. And that's one name I'm really interested in, because I think that's another one where if you really pushed hard this weekend, he could end up announcing soon.
And you go through the list of guys or other schools that you look at: Baylor, Boise State, Florida State. So to me, and that's for Kai Wesley. Also, another prospect that UW has offered the younger brother of, I believe, Wesley is the other one in the 27 or 28 class. Can't remember which one of those it is. But just, when you talk about the long-term projectability, Papa's like, wait, you got another one? Like, hang on. Let me get that one too. I want that one too. But he's down the road a bit. So, but you look at that one and say, the Puka connection, everything about how every time you get a guy from the state of Utah, I think of two guys, Puka and Voy. Sure. And for different reasons, where two different types of players, but Voy lined up at fullback, tight end. It was like there was a few different things he could do. I think Wesley, not necessarily like that exactly, but just that kind of perfect prototypical guy that you can go for, and who also maybe you could have keep the brotherly program together in terms of down the line Steeler comes to Washington as well. But the one there's a couple that intrigue me there. Baylor does intrigue me a little bit. You talk about they're also hosting Landon Murray this weekend, so one of those tight ends is going to commit somewhere. So, someone figure that one out. If Landon happened to commit to Baylor this weekend, A, I wouldn't be surprised about that. But also, B, then that eliminates that visit. So you just kind of try. And I think that, the frustrating and beautiful part about recruiting is it's a massive Jenga board, whatever you want to call it, where it's like all the pieces are there. You like the board that you're going to get, but like you still got to kind of, wait and figure. Right, exactly. How is it going to fall exactly, and what's going to be the thing that pulls it out? Because, heaven forbid you get, call it, this isn't the case here. Let's say Devon Benjamin comes in out of nowhere and says, hey, I want to come in here. Oh, wait, now this spot is now opened up here. Or, hey, maybe and just using those examples as to say, sometimes Washington will be a benefactor of that. Sometimes other schools will be. I think it's just that's the only frustrating part for fans. I understand. You just got to let it play out. But either way, you're going to be happy.
Absolutely. And I think one thing Washington fans would be really happy about is finding a way to get a commitment from Tristan Givens. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And again, been saying it all offseason. Washington, over 7.5. I absolutely love that line this season. I would go check out the over because I love this slate of road games. They're going to be a tough ones at Michigan, at Wisconsin. Not going to be easy games there, but at Maryland, at UCLA, at Washington State, I think Washington can go 3-2 on the road this season at the very worst. So something to keep an eye on there. And then with the way Husky Stadium is always factored in with Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, all the stars on this team. Getting over 7.5 wins feels very likely, in my opinion at least. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, Lars, this is something I wrote about a little bit on Huskies Wire over the weekend. Why Washington is very well suited to get Tristan Givens. You talk about the relationships. You can talk about all those different sorts of things with, the fantastic visit pictures that he used. One of them is our thumbnail photo for today. So appreciate UW's creative team for just the phenomenal work they're doing on that end of things as well. But I just, the more I look at this recruitment, and, to any UW fan who might be getting their hopes up, I think they're right to do so, because you look at just the way that Marcus Griffin was able to pull this off and get just simply an official visit so close to his commitment date, and just the way that Tennessee and Texas A&M both seem to feel about where they are with him. I feel like Washington has a realistic shot to pull his commitment.
This is what Washington gets for, I'm getting to something where when they went to go get Reuben Foster under Sark, that was we're just going to have on the table. This is we're actually going to we're going to go pick a peach and turn them into an apple.
Sure.
Being from the state of Georgia, the peach state.
No, I respect it.
and I may not have used that on Instagram. So for people that already saw that was it came from there. But with that being said, no, it's kind of a realistic way to put it, because otherwise a lot of people are going to say, wait, it doesn't make sense. Washington drop a bag. Actually, the other two bag schools are the ones involved here. Like, that's if we're being real about it. But with Tennessee and Texas A&M. But now, it's all legal and above board. It doesn't really matter. But with that being said, you're looking at thinking Washington provides the best opportunity, earliest opportunity, and kind of the best structure for Tristan in terms of if he goes to A&M, maybe, you get a scheme fit or anything like that. Washington seems to be the best setup for him.
So I mean this in the best way possible, because when I use this word, it's going to sound bad, but I don't mean it that way. Washington is the most desperate for him. And I mean that in the way of he is such a good scheme fit for what Ryan Walters wants to do. And again, this is all in stuff that I wrote about on Huskies Wire, and I wanted to expand on it, is he is such an impressive athlete at 6'4", 215. And I think that, it's something we talked about on the bonus show when we talked about Tristan, is Washington is going to be able to provide opportunities for him that, sure, you can get at Tennessee or Texas A&M, but it's just going to be a little bit different. And I think Washington knows that and is going to push that angle of, hey, this is how bad we want you. We're able to get an official visit, which is great, but look at all the things we're able to provide on, what has been a perfect weather weekend, which it's always nice when that lines up for the coaching staff. But Washington just has so many opportunities that they can provide in terms of especially what this defensive scheme is. Again, where he is such a talented athlete and he rushes the passer so well. He's got such a great frame to put on 10, 15, 20 pounds. And maybe Washington is going to, because we saw it last season with Isaiah Ward, with Russell Davis playing at that lighter weight. Maybe they're going to say, hey, we're not too concerned about where you are right now. I know that, on last week's show, I talked about they're probably going to want to put weight on him, which is certainly going to be the end game, as it should be. But maybe they don't want to rush that process and say, hey, whatever you can get to by the season, that's great. We don't have a target weight for you before we put you on the field, because of his explosiveness and because of his natural ability. And if you trust Aaron Van Horn and Jason Kafusi to coach that up, he's somebody who's not just going to be a talented pass rusher for you, because, we talk a lot about the 5 down front here on this show and what that's going to look like for Ryan Walters this fall. But having somebody like that where, a lot of times with that, just the way the defense is aligned, when Devin Bryant or X-Ray Alexander has been the guy to walk down from inside linebacker to outside at the start of the play, sometimes those players are going to drop into coverage. That is still a realistic outcome. And with somebody who moves a lot like Tristan does, look at, it's something we talked about in the 25 class with Zajius Rainey-Saleh. It's something I'm certainly going to be talking about, as we get to the June 20th weekend with Ramsack Fruin. It's just getting these big, versatile athletes who can do so many different things for you. And you're just going to put them in opportunities where they can thrive and they can succeed in the best way possible. And I think that Washington can sell that just differently than Tennessee and Texas A&M, because it's so different. Like that's the whole reason that we've been talking about Tristan Givens as much as we have, because this is just different. You want to make a statement in the Big Ten, you go pull a top 5 player out of Georgia. And that's where the desperation thing to, where I started this rant, which I didn't know was going to turn into this, which is where that comes from.
So another word, all great points. So I'm going to build off of that by saying, it's one thing we talk about a lot, turn one problem into another problem, and both problems are positive problems. Because again, you think of a problem, it's a negative, like, oh, you got problems? It's like, wait, what are you talking about? The problem of the size and the weight, that's a good problem to have, because again, you talk about a 5-star talent and saying, hey, is it okay if we start out at this weight and just kind of play into my role? Let that problem and the problem of how many guys you're going to take and the numbers and all that sorting out, it's like they're all good problems to have. So just put them all together into the same class, get them on the same practice field, and let them all sort it out. Because
exactly,
maybe Tristan ends up playing better at his lighter weight, and you say, actually, you know what? We'll say keep it only 5 to 10 pounds. We're just going to keep you there permanently and say, hey, we don't want you to get to 240, 50, keep adding weight. It's like, no, we just want you to gain just a little bit of weight, and we'll be good. Or maybe we'll play you into a different role by year 2, 3, and 4 and kind of just evolve your career. But I think also it builds into one thing we're kind of both hinting at is Jedd Fisch is trying to make Washington a destination.
Yeah.
Jedd Fisch came to Washington as a destination school for him. Now, again, we both know if Jedd Fisch gets an opportunity in the NFL, nobody passes up the league. That's a separate issue. But aside from that, make it an NFL destination for college kids. And I think that's exactly what this is where you're talking about getting a top 5 player potentially from the state of Georgia, which we all know produces and
great talent. Yeah.
Well, not like great talent, but the word Matt Doherty used perfectly. It was like not unusual amount, but
disproportionate amount.
Disproportionate. Thank you. I was like, I knew there was something. I was trying to think of that word, but a disproportionate level of talent, especially at that in the trenches. And I think this will be almost kind of that commitment where if Tristan does end up at Washington, which, like I said, we both said on the show before the visit when he came in, it's like, hey, like don't be surprised if he actually does end up at Washington. When I think it's a guarantee, it's not a lockdown lock. But I almost feel like with every day that it almost is a lockdown lock, because it's like if he was, think about it, and I say it for this reason.
No, I hear you.
If you think about this, if he was going to Texas A&M, go to Texas A&M. If you're going to Tennessee, go to Tennessee. The fact that you're going all the way out there with all the relationship ties, with all the opportunity ties, with making Seattle your own. Go to Georgia and say, hey, you know what? I'm a kid from Georgia who turned Seattle into a destination for football. That is what Tristan Givens can do.
No, I agree. And I absolutely love that. I just think it's one of those things where, since this is his first, true visit to Washington, where, as you alluded to on Friday, he has been up here before. He was up here for the Avery Strong Showcase last year and everything like that. Yeah, he's been here before, but I think it's one of those things where why not take these visits closer to home, especially since he does have a commitment date set for June 23rd. Why not take those other visits and just say, okay, yeah, let me feel this out, because, now I know what, because I'm sure that there have been other things going on in terms of, there's no way it's just, oh, hey, we're just bringing him up for an official. There's no way there weren't other calls or conversations that took place before that. So I'm sure he has a good idea of what this Washington staff was already, but why not now take everything that you've learned over the last couple of months and make 100% certainty? And I'm sure people are going to be very uncomfortable with that, because it's, oh, you can't let them off campus without a commit. And sure, I understand that argument very well, but why not go to Tennessee and go to Texas A&M? And now, knowing the relationship he has with Marcus Griffin, he knows what that feeling is. That whole family knows what that feeling is. Maybe you go to Tennessee and you go to Texas A&M and it's, oh yeah, I was really interested, but just the feeling I got from the relationship I have with Washington's coaching staff is just different. And I think that's kind of just the way this should play out. I think that's just the best possible option.
I agree. I mean, I think no matter how it does play out, like you're in a good position where I can understand the sentiment of take the visit, kind of just, because I think either way, with or without the visits, like let's say he commits, like you said, it's June 8th. Let's say he commits by June 12th to Washington. That's still just as significant, even though he didn't visit those two schools. But sure. I think to your point, as you were saying that, I was like, well, imagine fresh off a visit to Texas A&M after Tennessee or vice versa, you commit to Washington. Like that, I think is where Jedd's going to be like, oh,
yeah, that's
a hard life out here looking at the lake and, beautiful family, beautiful people, great connect. Yeah, Jedd's cooking. I gotta go find this tweet where I said Jedd's gonna be all right. Jedd's gonna be just fine in Seattle.
Lars, one small problem though with Sam Utu. Looks like he might be going to Alabama. So Lars, let's start with the negatives here. We had the positivity. Losing Sam Utu to Alabama, assuming that commitment does come to fruition after the crystal balls have flipped, would be a big loss. And I think it's something where he's such a big, talented athlete at 6'4", 320. When you and I heard these visits were scheduled, this is cause for concern. I feel like one of us might have said, "Hey man, pretty worried about where Alabama might sit if he ends up taking that visit." I wonder which of the two of us might have said that. But on top of that, I feel like we should spend a minute before. I guess I have a lot of thoughts on this. Just saying, this would be a really big loss because you've got a really solid offensive line class right now in Cody Green, Dominic Harris, and Adiong Yang. And adding somebody like Sam Utu would have really taken it over the top.
It would have, but I will throw out a name to counter this whole segment before we get into the conversation. John Mills.
Sure.
And the reason why I say that is John ended up committing early to Texas. Washington circled back. He circled the wagons. Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, and Jedd Fisch is an NFL guy, so we'll throw him in that mix, even though he didn't coach in Buffalo. Where I can see Sam committing to Alabama. I think it checks out, but just, season gets going, things happen, year 2 under Kalen. We'll see how that goes. All those sorts of things build into it where maybe by November, he's the guy that says, actually, you know what? I want to stay closer to the West Coast. And, Derek maybe flies down to Tuscaloosa and then they both fly up to Seattle, that type of thing. We're thinking, let me go pick my offensive lineman up one more time and bring him to Seattle because I think we understood why Alabama could be a choice here if it didn't end up being Washington. But I do kind of wonder, we know there's a couple other names on the board, but they really like Sam Utu. And so I wonder,
absolutely,
if John Mills have a situation where you lose the commitment early where we're like, oh, wow, Washington lost to Texas. I guess you can't blame him for going to Texas. But then you circle back and it's like, oh, okay, no, Washington didn't fall off. You just had to rethink things a little bit and ended up where he wanted to be.
So I'll be honest with you. I don't see that happening. And the biggest reason is what I wanted to get into. It's something I talked about a couple of our insiders. Shout out to Insider Coker. It's a point he's made several times. Washington is in on so many really impressive high caliber linemen that whoever you end up taking is going to be really solid. Where, for example, Pulelei'ite Primus supposed to come up here on June 20th. That's a really intriguing interior name. And, you'll just look at who that is, being a really powerful, just interior guy from Texas. That's a guy that you would certainly want to take and say, yeah, we're really comfortable with this. Are you taking him over, borderline top 100 guy from California? Probably not. But I think you're really comfortable with his skill set and where you might sit with him. And I would say the same about 4-star offensive tackle Collin Campbell, because he's set to visit this coming Friday. And I think Washington is in a really good spot with him. And I look at both of those guys, and it's one thing where, I talk about, Dominic Harris's size and what he could do at tackle. But you read at, some of these national recruiting writers. I know Adam Gorney had it. I believe Blair Angular or someone on the 247 side did as well, where it's, hey, what if Dominic Harris does end up at guard? Which would be great. That's a good problem to have, where you just have a guy like that on the interior. And you take somebody like Collin Campbell, who, he's a little light right now. He's listed at 6'7", 270, but a 4-star tackle who's the top player in Arizona, I believe, according to the 247 Sports Composite, who just has all the tools of a, just guy who can be that really athletic guy that can move with your quarterback outside the pocket. If, it's a Derek Sam in 3-4 years from now, right? Let's just go down that road. Who's got all the traits, all those tools, and needs some time to put on weight. So you don't necessarily need to worry about the whole, we need this guy to play right away. Because if he takes a couple of years, that's fine. When you look at this 25 class, and you mentioned John Mills, guys like Champ Talia, Jack Schaefer being another one who I'm really impressed with and see a future for him at tackle, where you have all of those guys, you can afford to be a little more patient with somebody like Campbell. And it's one of those things where you look at the optics of the situation. Yeah, one guy is much higher rated right now, but at the end of the day, you're trading a 4-star for a 4-star. So you're not like, it's a net neutral.
It's all subjective, right? It
is.
And that 4-star becomes a 3-star after you commit to your program anyway. So well, that being said,
that's never happened before. What?
No, what? Well, actually, as you were thinking about that, what name came to mind with Dom Harris was Nate Kleppo.
Sure.
A guy that I remember was listed as a tackle coming out of high school, coming out of Rainier Beach, and ended up playing guard. And I think Dom falls in that same. I swear I wrote this article on Huskies Wire. Go check it out if you can find it. Where when I was doing that evaluation of Harris, I was like, wait, he's got a handful of snaps at guard, and it's a willing blocker, shall we say, just at any position. Like you can put him at right, you can put him at a wide receiver. He's gonna be a menace as a blocker. Like obviously. But with that being said, just think about like he was willing to line up and be athletic at any position. So I think that could suit him well because the reason why I wanted to bring that up and kind of go down that road was you mentioned Collin Campbell as a tackle. It's like is he more of a tackle or could you see him going to guard? And I think I would see him more as a tackle. I see Collin Campbell more as a tackle.
He'd be the tackle.
So I would be the one to leave him outside. Then you have Audion and Harris as your interior, and Cody Green and Campbell as your tackle. Like that's a pretty good class, man. Like if you look at those four, like I'm more than. And again, that's no bag on Sam Utu there, but it's just like, hey, look, if you don't happen to get one, all right, you can swallow that a lot easier when you got a composite 5-star, a 4-star, a rising 3-star. And call it a rising 3/4, depending on where Dom finishes in the rankings.
Oh, absolutely. With Georgia, Texas, and LSU all offering the last week, like he's certainly just going to continue to pick up steam on the recruiting trail. And it's one of those things where exactly like it's just you were, and that's the whole point, right? You were in on enough high quality bodies to find a way to make it work. And if at the end of the day, like what you were talking about comes true, and Sam Utu does want to circle back and say, hey, like, maybe I am interested in staying closer to home. You can maybe find a way to make that work, but you don't need to rely on that is more the point. Where last season, it was a really solid offensive line class, but it wasn't built in the same way that this one is, where you get Chantalea early. That's a really great ad. And then, you had Jake Flores really early as well. Logan Coleman Bruce comes in over the summer, and it was, okay, you're still looking for some pretty significantly sized pieces, literally as well, to add to that group. And, you get Jack Schaefer to flip from Iowa State in September, which is a really nice win. And then John Mills takes till December, which is, again, it's not a bad thing. It happens when it happens. But you don't need to go down that road and rely on something like that is more the point. Because if, let's say Collin Campbell is the final offensive line commit in this class, you are more than happy with that. And those 4 guys are the ones that sign. You're not going to complain about that in any way, shape, or form.
So, it's interesting. Because as you're making all those great points, kind of the dynamic that came to my mind was, do you want to be offensive or defensive? Because you have an offensive-minded head coach, you can kind of play offense. You can go do it. Sure. But here's the thing. If you were to get all those commits in June, like you said, and let's say, whether it's Utu, Campbell, whoever, but you lock them down before the July dead period, now you got to play defense. Now you are Texas. Now you are the other schools that you were going after and trying to pick those guys from. Now you're the one, Jedd. Now you're the one, Ryan Walsh. Everybody else has got to play defense and say, hey, you know what? We got to hold on to these guys because it's one thing to get him in September, June, July, August. Can you hold on to him in November and December to get to that signing day period? And then once you're signed, all good. Well, actually, mostly all good in terms of, for like 99.9%, you're all good. The point on one, you leave. But either way, the point being that it'll be interesting to see, can they play defense at the same level that they play offense when it comes to recruiting? So
I think you bring up a really just interesting topic with that, because it's something where, outside of the guys that you lost to Oregon last year, which were circumstances we talked about a lot on the show, where, a guy who didn't receive that offer till really, or a couple of guys really, who didn't get that offer till super late from a school that they did have higher than Washington on their board originally, is a little bit different than what this is with, let's talk about Dominic Harris in that light, because, I know people are seeing those offers on Twitter or on Instagram or wherever and saying, oh, are you able to hold off Georgia, Texas, or LSU if they really want to make a push? And it's something where, remember, Washington was the only school that had offered Dominic Harris for almost 2 months. So that's one of those things where that is a factor in all this. And I use him as the example here because I think that's just the easiest one, especially with him being the most recent offensive line commit. But you look at all that, and I think it's something where we didn't see that. Again, where I bring up, Zach Staskowski and Vander Plug. Outside of that, we didn't really see a lot of waffling from anybody in last year's class. And I think that shows that this staff is really good at once they secure a commitment, like it's just a lot of these guys have locked it down. And it's something where we've talked to Derek Coleman-Bruce on this show. We've talked to Derek Zambin on this show. And it's, you hear those guys talk and I'm not concerned about that person flipping at all.
And I think, and I just want to throw it out there because, again, I think
that's fair.
It's one, but it's also, and the way to counter that, to counter your point, is it's one thing to hold on to certain caliber of player, which, again, still good players, like you're talking about Iowa State, the Jack Schaefer, like good talent. But then there's the other, like the top 100, top 50. Can you hold on? Could you hold on to a Tristan Givens between July and December when he's got to sign? Can you hold on to Derek Zambin when he's going to sign in December and those types of things? I think the answer is yes, like you said, because they've proven it with a bunch of other guys where, aside from a incredible Spencer Webb connection with Vander Plug and hometown state, whatever you want to call it, despotism that Oregon did for Zach Saskowski, like you didn't really lose anybody. And so I think it's just the more you get into those conversations, the harder it is. But again, that's why you hire Jedd Fisch. That's why Jedd has hired the people that he has, whether it's, all the way from retaining Jake Crawford to going out and getting, a bunch of guys in terms of the Marcus Griffins of the world. Why is his name is escaping me? The one from Bosco, the former
Julio Wadood.
Julio, exactly. I was like, Julio. Why was I forgetting that? Because the last name was escaping me. You go and get all these people in the building so they can bring the best of the best in the building, and that's how you build a powerhouse in Washington.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all FJers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.